it's I mean it kind of was bad.
Yeah.
I just think like it's interesting too when you look at. I mean, it's not like we dominated possession, but we had more possession than them, like by a fraction of a percentage. But it was interesting because it didn't look like very good possession or proper build up or like the kind of possession you would envision with Isco and Odegaard together. And I do think the fact that like, them getting carved defensively and also not having many meaningful moments in build up is like obviously a symptom of, well, it's preseason and there's no synergy and there's barely any fitness and these players are new. One is from Castilla, one is returning from loan, and one is really just trying to get a hold of his career at this point. And it's going to be a mess. Like, and I don't know, I'm really, really ignorant to what Rangers are doing. I don't know like what we saw today. If I was like put in a Rangers trivia pub right now and was asked to like answer a bunch of Rangers questions, I'd be last on the bar. I have no idea. Like, I don't know if this was their best 11. I don't know if this is like they were training 10 years for this game. Maybe like the way it looked like it today, they had more synergy. Whatever it was, they played really good. And by the way, welcome to all the Rangers fans who joined us on Twitter. We got at one point during the game, I checked the managing notifications on Twitter, and it's like X person and 200 others have followed you, and they were all Rangers fans. So welcome to all the Rangers fans, and in case any of you made it to this podcast, welcome to you as well. Stick around for much more Rangers content for the 2021-2022 season on the Managing Madrid podcast. But they looked really good in doing so, and but so that's kind of why I tried to shift my focus a little bit towards like the individual performances of this game, just to see like where they are physically and stuff. So I think Matt brings up a lot of good points about Odegaard. And I mean, the goal that we scored is kind of like, I mean, ironically, because Odriozola's clearance was terrible, but it somehow finds its way to Odegaard in the perfect position, and he launches this ball carrying counter, which is exactly where you want him, and that's where he was at his best with Real Sociedad and Vitesse and at Arsenal in some moments. I think the problem with it is that, especially if you envision Zidane's Real Madrid guys, you're not going to get Odegaard in a position like that much, because a lot of Zidane's Real Madrid was trying to break down low blocks who don't give you those transition opportunities. And so I don't know how much of this we're going to see, but I did want to pick your brains about one thing. And I don't think the three of us discussed this together. Ancelotti, at one point in the past like 3 weeks or so, and this was after his initial press conference, he said it afterwards. He said something like, I want this team to be more direct and to be comfortable playing without the ball. Or so, I'm paraphrasing, I'm butchering it actually, but it was something to that effect about having less possession and playing more direct. And to me, the way I interpreted it, just basically by revisiting Carlos' old games, was that a lot of the ways you can generate transition opportunities when a team doesn't give you those is to press more. And when you win the ball high up the pitch, when the defense is backpedaling, it's kind of like a transition opportunity because you're not facing a low block in that moment anymore. And I thought maybe that's part of what he meant. And so my question to you guys is, do you think, and we can start with you, because I cut you off, do you think that what we saw today on the Rodrigo goal, where Odegaard carries the ball or has opportunities like that, we'll see a lot of this season, or do you think those moments will be hard to come by?
I hope so, but I do think kind of like what you were mentioning, we'll have to force those. And that's just kind of more and more what the modern game is about for teams who face sides who are more comfortable sitting off because they recognize you have the greater talent. You have to manufacture that, and either that's through pressing, like you mentioned, or being so good in possession and having all the things worked out that you're just able to cleanly progress through a block and get a team backpedaling like it's a counterattack when it wasn't. One thing I do think we'll see a little bit more of is like that possession thing, not necessarily because I think Ancelotti is going to like institute this like positional structure that Zidane didn't. That's not really Ancelotti's style, but because he will emphasize players like Odegaard, there will be maybe a little more emphasis on playing between the lines, which also might be what he means by being more direct, whereas with Zidane, it was always very flat and controlled. Partially because of personnel, partially because of how much freedom Zidane lets his sides have, but also because I think that's what he just emphasized. He really wanted to control games that way. And as we had less and less offensive talent, that became even more important because defense became our thing, right? We were partially able to control games without the ball, and we sat off more and more into like mid blocks and did less pressing and stuff. So I think that could be a way. But if we're seeking to also do this via high pressing, forget this game where the pressing wasn't good. That is probably like the weakest part of Ancelotti's track record as a tactician, where as like the modern game has gone on, Ancelotti didn't really have like pressing tactics in his bag in the way it was in a modern sense, as most coaches didn't have, because pressing is just drastically different than what it used to be. Like I haven't seen much since Napoli through to Everton to suggest that Ancelotti has like kind of figured it out, and he's an especially good pressing coach. So maybe he does intend to use like younger legs and more energetic side, someone like Odegaard, to go out and high press teams. But that's something I'm less optimistic on, and I'll need to see some games, like 6-7 good games like that to change my mind and be like, okay, he's kind of figured it out. I think it's more going to come from the possession side and letting someone like Odegaard have more minutes, receive between the lines, and turn relief players.
I do think it was interesting to talk about Odegaard's pressing too, because Matt did mention that there were a few sequences where it looked like Odegaard maybe was working harder rather than working smarter. And obviously with pressing, that it has to be a synergetical thing. It has to be one entity pressing together, and if it's not, then you're screwed. And I get that, and I do think like it's probably okay for him to go a little bit full tilt here just to get fitness levels and sprint. I would say, like, that thing that we always talked about with Odegaard at his previous clubs, where he's always pointing people where to go, like marshalling the other players behind the ball to press behind them, or making sure they know where to press. And his pressing numbers have always been through the roof. Today there were actually moments in the first half where he like single-handedly was able to get the team in the right spots. He was sprinting full force and everyone kind of followed him, and he was able to get everyone in the right spot. So I think that's impressive. I do think this is one thing to be encouraged about more than anything, is that Odegaard, because of his style of play, I think it would be a shame not to have a more high-pressing team this year, especially given that Kroos is awesome at it, Benzema's awesome at it too, and Modric is too. And so we have the players for it. And I think Odegaard is going to be someone who can really help us in that regard.